35 years ago, on December 6th, 1989, I was a young 8-year-old girl waiting for my father to come home for supper. It was the days before cell phones, and we didn't know where he was. And we waited around the dinner table, worrying and wondering. It turned out that he was at École Polytechnique that night, and he witnessed ambulances waiting to take the bodies of 14 young women who were brutally murdered in their classroom. He explained all this to my mother, I think not realizing that I was listening. And when I asked why these women had been shot, I don't think he knew what to say other than because they were women. Canadians of my generation remember where they were on December 6th, 1989. Et demain, comme à chaque année,
and tomorrow, as I do every year, I will join myself with my community in Outremont in Montreal, with families and survivors of the massacre at Polytechnique. I would like to share my gratitude to Nathalie Provost, whom ici présente. She is courageous and determined and inspires us every day.
Also with me is Suzanne Zakour from the National Association of Women and the Law, who fights relentlessly in order to curb the scourge of gender-based violence in Canada. Professor Wendy Zukier is also here. She is the president of the Coalition for Gun Control and has spent a lifetime fighting in order to secure Canadians. Thank you all for joining us and supporting our government's announcement of today, which will be led by Minister LeBlanc, the Minister of Public Safety, Minister Blair, the Minister of National Defence, and Minister Duclos, Minister of Procurement and Lieutenant for Quebec. In 2015, we were elected by Canadians with a promise to get handguns and assault weapons off of our streets. We've banned 1,500 models of assault-style firearms, including the Ruger Mini 14, the gun used in the Polytechnique massacre, and at Portapique, the two worst mass shootings in the history of Canada. We have taken several other concrete measures since then, and today we are taking the next step forward. It is an honor to pass the microphone over to our Minister of Public Safety, Minister for Democratic Institutions, and Minister for Intergovernmental Affairs, Dominic LeBlanc.
Alors, merci beaucoup, Rachel. Bonjour à tous et à toutes.
Thank you, Rachel.
Merci d'être là aujourd'hui.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for being with us. I apologize for not being with you in Ottawa. I am back in New Brunswick for funerals this afternoon. As Rachel said, tomorrow is the 35th anniversary of the massacre that occurred at Polytechnique on December 6, 1989. This was a dark chapter of our collective history, and it had an impact on a generation of Quebecers and Canadians. 35 years later, survivors of this tragedy are continuing to fight for better firearms control. We are honored to have them with us today. I would like to thank Nathalie from Police se souvient, who traveled from Montreal in order to take part in this announcement. I would also like to thank the members of the Coalition of Control on Firearms and Women and Law for being with us today. Over the past months, I was able to speak with Nathalie and Heidi on the importance of gun control. Nobody can remain indifferent. We can see that they are very frank and have very relevant perspectives, and I am deeply inspired by their courage and their devotion. We must act in order to prevent another tragedy from happening.
To honor the memories of those we lost in mass shootings is to act on gun control and to restrict access to the very weapons used to commit these horrible crimes. Our goal is to ensure that no community, no family is devastated by mass shootings in Canada again. That's why today, as Rachel said, we're building on the historic advances we've made since 2015 by taking further action. Today, the government is adding a further 324 unique makes and models of assault-style firearms to the list of prohibited firearms in Canada. This prohibition takes effect immediately. This means these firearms can no longer be legally used, sold, or imported in Canada, and can only be transferred or transported under extremely limited circumstances. Les 324 modèles d'armes à feu
These
prohibées
324 models of prohibited firearms will be added to the 1,500 models added in 2020 and have technical characteristics that are similar, and they are made for battlefields, not for hunting. They were identified following a robust consultation with experts from the RCMP. I would like to thank the Commissioner Mike Duhem and the Deputy Commissioner Brian Larkin, who is in Ottawa today, and I would like to thank their teams for the advice and support.
The government has introduced an amnesty that is currently in force and expires on October 30th, 2025, to protect individuals who legally purchased these firearms prior to the ban. This amnesty period will protect these individuals from criminal liability as they take steps to come into compliance with the law. During the amnesty period, there is an exception to allow Indigenous peoples exercising a right under Section 35 of the Constitution, as well as those who use firearms for sustenance hunting, to continue to use their now prohibited firearms to hunt, if previously non-restricted, until a suitable replacement can be found. As with the previous list of firearms, these models will, of course, be part of the assault-style firearms compensation program. And to that end, I'm pleased to point out that the pilot program of Phase 1 of the gun buyback program is now underway. The program will be open for all businesses in the coming days. As part of that process, the Government of Canada has committed to the Ukrainian government to identify whether some of these guns could be donated to support the fight for democracy in Ukraine. My colleague Bill Blair will speak on this in a few moments. In addition to banning these guns, we're also taking action on the regulatory front. Next Friday, December 13th, we will table regulations to ensure that no firearm can come into Canada or be sold in Canada without first being approved by the RCMP. And no later than the end of January, we will table additional measures in Parliament to address the rates of gun violence in situations of gender-based and intimate partner violence. We will also introduce further regulations on red and yellow flag laws early this spring, and regulations on large capacity magazines no later than March. De plus, Nous allons réunir un panel
Furthermore,
d'experts
we will create a
pour appuyer le
panel of
travail de la
experts
GRC.
to support
Un
the
panel d'experts
RCMP.
qui comprendra
This
évidemment
panel will
les
include,
représentants autochtones
of course,
qui se
Indigenous
penchera sur la
representatives
classification
who will look at the
des armes à feu
classification
qui ne font pas
of
partie
firearms
des modèles
that are not
prohibés
a part
aujourd'hui.
of the
Ils
models
nous
that are currently
reviendront avec leurs
prohibited.
recommandations
They will share
en
their
début de l'année
recommendations
prochaine,
with us at the
et
beginning
nous
of next
allons
year,
prendre des mesures
and we will
additionnelles
take additional
pour
measures
resserrer
in order to
davantage
further
l'accès à ces
restrict
armes.
access
Notre gouvernement
to those
continuera
firearms.
à faire tout ce qui est en-
Our government will
qui est en
continue
son pouvoir
doing
pour que
everything
le
in its
Canada
power
ne connaisse plus jamais
so that
de
Canada
fusillade
never
de
again
masse. Et
sees
avec
a
ça, je
mass
vous
shooting.
remercie, et Rachel,
Thank
je
you,
vous retourne la
and
parole.
Rachel, the floor is yours.
Merci. À moi
Thank you.
de remercier et de reconnaître que nous sommes évidemment
I would like to thank you and state that we have with us Deputy Commissioner Brian Larkin,
the RCMP, who has worked tirelessly to get us to this day. We'll also be taking your questions at the end. It is now my distinct pleasure to welcome to the podium our Minister of National Defence, Bill Blair.
Thank you very much, Rochelle. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I think this is a very important day, and I wanted to acknowledge Natalie, Suzanne, Wendy, and people I know who have worked so tirelessly on trying to make Canada a safer place for all of us. And as we mark a very important and solemn anniversary tomorrow, I hope it increases all of our collective resolve to continue to do what is required. As my colleague, Minister LeBlanc, has indicated, we've been working very closely with our friends in Ukraine to ensure that weapons that were intended to be used in combat could be made available to them. And since Russia's brutal and unjustified invasion of Ukraine, Canada has and continues to make every effort to support our Ukrainian allies in their fight to defend their territory, their sovereignty, their citizens, and to win this war. And since 2015, Canada has committed over $19 billion worth of aid and support to Ukraine, including $4.5 billion worth of lethal and non-lethal military equipment. The Ukraine security forces have been very clear about the resources, support, and equipment that they need most, and we have always listened to them and tailored our donations to best meet those needs. And just this past October, we reached out to the Ukrainians once again to see whether any of the weapons that are currently under amnesty through Canada's assault-style firearms compensation program could be of any use to them in their fight against Russia. And they confirmed that indeed, some of the weapons that are part of the program would be suitable. And so I am pleased today in joining in this announcement to announce also that the Department of National Defence will begin working with the Canadian companies that have weapons that Ukraine needs and which are already eligible for the assault-style firearm compensation program in order to get these weapons out of Canada and into the hands of the Ukrainians. For companies that choose to participate in this initiative, the Government of Canada will pay them with the same amount, exactly the same amount, for weapons donated to Ukraine as they would have paid them to participate in the existing compensation program as outlined by my colleague, Minister LeBlanc. Every bit of assistance that we can offer to the Ukrainians is one step towards their victory and a worthwhile investment of our collective time and efforts. Ukrainians are fighting not only for their sovereignty and freedom, but they're also fighting for the rules-based international order that has kept the world safe for nearly 80 years. And our support for Ukraine in this fight will be steadfast and committed. We will continue to support Ukraine with all of the help that we can to ensure that they have the resources and support that they need to win this war and to rebuild once the fighting stops. Thank you very much. Back to you, Rachel.
Merci beaucoup. Et j'ai le plaisir
Thank you.
de passer la parole
I will now
maintenant
give
à
the
notre
floor
ministre,
to
des Services publics
the
et de
Minister for
l'Approvisionnement,
Public
ainsi
Service
que le
and
lieutenant
Procurement
pour le Québec,
and
Monsieur le
the
ministre
Quebec Lieutenant,
Jean-Yves Duclos.
Mr. Jean-Yves Duclos.
Merci beaucoup, Rachel. Et
Thank you very much,
bonsoir à tous
Rachel,
et à toutes celles qui sont ici,
and good afternoon,
avec nous,
everyone,
tout
Thank you for being with us for this important announcement. It's important for the safety of our communities, and we are showing the hard work that has been done to fight gun violence. December 6, 1989, so 35 years ago tomorrow, Canada faced one of its worst mass shootings. A killer entered Polytechnique in Montreal, killed 14 women and injured 13 others. 7 years ago, January 19, 2017, in my riding, there's a man who killed 6 Muslim people and injured many others. These show the devastating impact of armed violence in our communities throughout the country. To the survivors, families and friends of victims, and all those who work hard to defend our rights, I would like to thank them for their efforts. Some of them are with us today. We would like to thank you for your determination, your perseverance to help us with our national responsibility to limit dangerous firearms in our communities.
Canadians deserve to live in communities that are safe and free of gun violence. Weapons of war have no place in our communities. Aujourd'hui, nous annonçons que 35...
Today, we're announcing that 325 makes and models are now prohibited in Canada. That's 104 new families of firearms. The RCMP identified these weapons using the same criteria included in the order from May 2020 and is part of the technical definition approved in Bill C-21, semi-automatic military-style weapons with rapid-fire capability.
The ban of a further 324 unique makes and models was made possible by the RCMP using the criteria for the May 2020 order in Council and a new technical definition from Bill C-21, which define what is a prohibited firearm. The RCMP has a deep knowledge of firearms found in Canada, and they have the ability to determine which firearms are designed for military purposes and those that can be considered reasonable firearms for hunting. We should not be presented with a false choice that restricting war weapons is an assault on law-abiding, responsible gun owners and hunters. It is also our government's intent to table next week regulations that will ensure that all new makes and models of firearms reaching our country are properly accounted for by the RCMP in the firearms reference table. This means that the list of prohibited firearms will now be evergreen. In January 2025, the government will also table measures in the House of Commons to address the increasing rates of domestic violence and gender-based violence by enacting Section 6.1, Section 70.1, and Section 70.2 from Bill C-21. We will continue to work towards regulations on red and yellow flags this spring. Also, earlier in November, like our colleague Minister LeBlanc mentioned earlier, we concluded a pilot with 4 businesses which resulted in the collection and destruction of the first prohibited firearms under the assault-style firearms compensation program. In the coming days, we will reach out to all firearms businesses in the country so that they can also participate in Phase 1 of the program. This means that we are one step closer to taking all assault-style weapons off our streets. I couldn't stress enough that assault weapons are just that, weapons of war which are making our communities unsafe. The prohibition of these firearms will also extend to keeping our borders secure and will help stop illegal smuggling of firearms into Canada. We have a responsibility to strengthen firearms legislation. We also have a responsibility to support intervention and prevention programs to stop gun and gang violence even before it starts. whether it is targeted towards women, religious communities, or any other Canadian, there is no place for hate and violence in this country. Un Canadien tué par une arme à feu est un Canadien.
A Canadian killed by a firearm is one Canadian too many. Thank you.
Merci, Ministre Duclos.
Thank you, Minister Duclos.
To all cabinet ministers that are here today for your leadership, and indeed to the many leaders in our government that have fought for stronger gun control in Canada. And we are joined today by one of them, Pam Damoff, who has fought relentlessly for stronger gun control over the years that she has been a member of Parliament. It is now a distinct pleasure to welcome to the podium two incredible women. Je vous présente maintenant Suzanne Zacour,
Suzanne Zacour from the National Association of Women in Law, and Nathalie Provost from Police se souvient. Police remembers.
Good afternoon. My name is Suzanne Zacour. I'm the Director of Legal Affairs at the National Association of Women in the Law. For the past 50 years, NAL has been at the forefront of advocating for laws that promote women's safety, freedom, and equal rights. Last year, NAL founded the Women for Gun Control Coalition to advocate alongside 32 other women's rights organizations for strong measures in Bill C-21 to protect women from intimate partner gun violence. The data is clear. There is an epidemic of gender-based violence in Canada. Firearms are a serious risk factor in situations of domestic violence, especially for rural women. One has only to consider the recent femicides and familicides in provinces such as Nova Scotia, Ontario, and Manitoba this year to understand the importance of today's announcement. It is within this context that NAL is here today to commend the federal government for listening to the voices of women, most of whom strongly support the gun control measures it is delivering to make Canada safer from gun violence. As you've heard, today's announcement comes on the eve of the 35th anniversary of the École Polytechnique massacre. This tragic anniversary reminds us of the central and devastating role that guns often play when it comes to violence against women. In just 20 minutes, the lives of 14 women were stolen, and 10 women and 4 men were seriously injured by one man with a legal assault weapon who hated women. The epidemic of intimate partner violence in Canada demands strong leadership from our government to address this crisis. Today, we're seeing that leadership in action. Still, work remains to be done, and time is of the essence. We hope to see fast and decisive action to bring the domestic violence provisions of Bill C-21 into force, because every day that passes, women's lives are put at risk. Survivors and advocates have worked tirelessly to push for these measures, and we are relieved and grateful to see movement by the government on this important issue for the lives and safety of women and children. We now call on all party leaders, Prime Minister Trudeau, Mr. Poilievre, Mr. Singh, Mr. Blanchette, and Ms. May, to commit to safeguarding these life-saving measures to ensure the safety of women today and tomorrow. Mon nom est Suzanne Zacour. Je suis la directrice des
My name is Suzanne Zacour. I'm Director of Legal Affairs for the National Association of Women in Law. We defend women's rights in Canada and have done so for more than 50 years. Last year, we founded the Coalition of Women Against Armed Violence to have strong measures in Bill C-21 to protect women against armed violence. There's an epidemic of violence against women in Canada. We know that the presence of firearms is an important factor of risk in situations of domestic violence, especially for women in rural areas. It's in this context that our association is congratulating the federal government for listening to women. most strongly support control firearms in order to make Canada more safe against armed violence. Today's announcement arrives just before the 35th anniversary of the Polytechnique massacre. This event shows the devastating role that firearms play in violence against women. In 20 minutes, 14 women were killed and 13 others were injured by a man who had a legal assault-style firearm, who hated women. The epidemic of violence against women requires leadership from our government. We are seeing this leadership now, and there is still work to do. Every day, before the implementation of these measures, women's safety is at risk. We are happy to see progress on certain important files, and we invite all party leaders to implement these measures to ensure the safety of women today and tomorrow. Thank you.
Merci, Suzanne.
Thank you, Suzanne.
Thank you very much. I see you, Christina, in the crowd. Thank you for being here today. Merci, Christina, du Bloc québécois.
Thank you, Christina, from the Bloc, for being with us. Today is an important day, but it's at the end of 35 years of work, and in fact, it's not the final day. There is a lot of work left to do. There were steps forward, but also steps back. As you know, today is very emotional for me.
Was the last when I went to bed 35 years ago with all my innocence. I lost it 35 years ago. At 5 o'clock p.m., I was in a descent, and after that, 30 minutes after, it was done. I have lost my naivete. It takes a long, long way to come back and stand up before you today. And one of my own strategy to stand up is to work for everyone, for myself, for the memory of my colleagues, of my classmates, for my school, for my profession, but for all Canadians also. And that fight on gun control is mainly a fight for a better security for all Canadians. And I really, really, really want it to be heard by all of you. Maybe fighting for gun control, it seems a very narrow issue, but it has a very big impact on us, and it's a symbol. For us, it was a way to conquer, to go back to control of our lives. And we were able to build Polytechnique after the massacre, after the femicide, should I say. And we have to name it for what it was. It was a femicide. We were shot. My colleagues were killed. I was wounded because I was a woman studying in engineering. So I will not repeat what Susan said, but we have to complete as quickly as possible everything that can be done regarding gender-based violence. And before I move further away, I just want to take a moment with you to repeat the names of my classmates. They are among us today. Their memory is among us. But their families also are among us, because they were the first to begin that fight, along with my classmate Heidi Radjen. We were there. We were with the family in January 1990 when we requested for a ban, a complete and comprehensive ban on assault-style weapon. And today is another step forward, that ban. And I really, really appreciate the leadership and the will that was taken in the last months to have a real buyback program that will be efficient for all Canadians. So please, and you may realize I moved today, but I want to tell you the names of my classmates. Geneviève Bergeron, Hélène Colgan, Nathalie Croteau, Barbara Daigneault, Anne-Marie Edward, Maude Aviernick, Maryse Lagagnère, Maryse Leclerc, Anne-Marie Edward, Barbara Kluznik Vidayevich, Sonia Pelletier, Michel Richard, Annie Saint-Arnaud et Annie Turcotte. Ce ne sont pas que des noms. Ce sont des femmes avec des rêves.
These are not only names, these are women.
Des pères, des mères, des familles.
These are mothers,
C'est
fathers,
une communauté.
partners, a community
Et aujourd'hui,
that fell.
c'est notre communauté qui se relève.
And today it is our community standing up another step forward.
La violence faite aux femmes est un enjeu extrêmement
Violence against women is an extremely complex issue. And so thank you for continuing to fight. And you know, Minister Duclos, Minister LeBlanc, you know that we work hard and we will continue to make sure that you work hard. And we will work with you so that all measures to increase protecting women will be implemented. And the more quickly you can act, the better. We know that you don't have complete control over everything in Parliament, and we are afraid that the Liberal government will fall. But everything that we can do to move forward on things that have an impact on violence against women, we will do. I know that among you, there are some who would say 325?
5 new weapons that are prohibited today. But for us, it is a progress, because what remains is not a lot of number. We have a promise today in front of you on the eve of the 35th anniversary that what's remaining will be banned, and I want to believe it. Many of you know that it was not clear for me that I would be there today and smiling. I know I'm crying, but I'm also smiling because it's an important step forward, and I really believe that what remains to be done will be done. Donc,
324 firearms today being prohibited is important. What's left are firearms that are few and far between, that are in the hands of Canadians and companies. And this is a strong signal being sent to people wanting these kinds of firearms. The government is acting. And so even if this program isn't perfect, I think it's good enough. Perfection is hard to reach, but we want to do better. Another thing, weapons that will be taken today are weapons that can be used in war. Do you realize that? That's not trivial. What we're learning is not trivial. I knew that. I knew that with all my being. But these are military weapons.
That in that list of weapons, there are weapons that will be recognized for war in Ukraine. I knew in my flesh and because of my wounds that those are just killing weapons, war weapons, military weapons. So I'm so proud that today we're doing something. You realize that I could be there for the last hours or so. I want to thank you all. Rachel, thank you. Monsieur Duclos, Monsieur Leblanc, Pam, Wendy, since the beginning. The RCMP, we need you. You are the experts. You know, and you have to to express your leadership. We need you. Thank you for all your work. The women's movement is strategic in the reason why I'm here today, still able to stand up. And merci, Christina, je suis très heureuse de te voir là.
Thank you, Christina. Christina, I'm happy to see you here. For Police se souvient and for students at Polytechnique, we started in January 1990. and we didn't have the same allies all the time. And so having people with us today is important. And I want to remind Canadians, regardless of their political affiliation, that the safety of our children, of our streets, of our women, of people who are different, this is what we are fighting for today. I am fighting for our safety. I'm not fighting against anyone. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup. Vous êtes des femmes.
Thank you very much. You are inspiring women. We are now going to move to questions. I will give the floor to the moderator.
Take one question, one follow-up. We'll start in the room, then we'll move online, and we'll start in French with Mylène Crête, La Presse.
Oui.
Hello, Minister LeBlanc. What can you tell us about the 150 weapons that are not part of this prohibition? That's a very good question. Today, there are 324 firearms being added to the prohibited list of firearms. As I stated, our work is not done. I am pleased to commit the government to completing this work before the buyback program is to begin. We can't start the buyback program with individuals before completing the work. The RCMP will be completing this work with their technical experts. Deputy Commissioner Larkin could give you details. They have an expert panel that will support them in this work. The work is not done. It is a good step forward, but we do need to complete the process, which will be done by February, by the beginning of February, before the start of the buyback program, where people will be receiving compensation for sending in these prohibited firearms. If I understand correctly, the RCMP will examine models such as the SKS that was controversial. Yes, that is work that will be done in the coming weeks, and by February, the work will be completed, and we will have a second list. And so that will be done before the buyback program, as I mentioned.
Kate McKenna, CBC.
Good afternoon. For Minister LeBlanc, since the ban has been announced, how many guns, how many firearms have actually been collected and destroyed, and what exactly is the date that Phase 1 is going to start?
So perhaps Deputy Commissioner Larkin can add the details, and Jean-Yves is there, Duclos as well. His department has been really leading the buyback portion. Phase 1, as you know, is to collect from the inventory of gun stores, of gun dealers. These are guns that they lawfully purchased for sale before they were prohibited. So the government will, I expect in the coming days, literally in the coming days, I hope by next week, all of these gun stores will receive information on how they can register online in terms of what inventory they have. And then those guns will be collected and they'll be compensated. But Jean-Yves or Deputy Commissioner Larkin, I've seen photos of the first guns that have been destroyed as part of a pilot project, as Jean-Yves said, with 4 businesses. This was to test the IT, the website. Those tests, I'm told, have gone well. So every other business that has these firearms in their inventory in the coming days, and not weeks, but days, will be eligible to begin to return them for compensation. But perhaps Deputy Commissioner Larkin could add something?
I'll add very little to what Dominic has just said. He has summarized really well what we have done for the phase of collection of firearms from businesses. So a pilot has been running since the beginning of November. The pilot had a couple of objectives. First was to obviously test the technology that we needed to collect and share the information needed on those firearms. The second objective was to test the ability of the contracting company to actually go on site, collect the firearms, transport them in the appropriate place, and eventually destroy those firearms. A couple of dozen firearms were collected and processed in that particular manner, and today we are able to announce the official launch of phase one, the phase of collection from merchants, from shops, as Dominic just said a moment ago.
For my follow-up, it's for Madame Prévost. I'm just wondering, it's been 4.5 years since this buyback program was announced. We're heading into an election year. The ministers aren't able to give a date for when even phase one is going to start. How optimistic are you that phase one and phase two will be in place by the next election?
The fact that the pilot program had begun is a good step forward. The fact that we are gathered here today with a much more completed list, and that we are promised in front of all of you on this day that the list of prohibited weapons will be completed, gives me hope. And you understand that on that issue, my role is to keep my faith high. If I lose hope right now, who will fight for it? So we won't stop.
Journal de Montréal.
Oui, bonjour. Écoutez, je voulais savoir, la période
Yes.
d'amnistie va finir vers
When the amnesty period will end by the end of 2025, there are over 14,000 weapons that should be returned to the government, if I understand correctly. Is there a plan
les gens ne redonnent pas leurs armes
if ever people do not give back their weapons before the end of the amnesty order?
En passant, la phase 1 a commencé.
By the way, phase one has begun.
And phase one, we call phase one the phase of collecting firearms from shops. And as I said, it started as a pilot in the last few weeks, and it is now officially announced that, as Dominic said, shops will be informed of the way in which they can and should participate in that phase one program. Donc, sur la question de l'amnistie,
Regarding the amnesty, it's well known that it will be illegal to own these firearms. We believe that we have the time in the coming weeks and months to implement phase two with individuals, but also we are moving forward so that by October 2025, people acquire these weapons legally, and we want them to be compensated properly. If I may add, we trust that people want to respect Canada's laws. These people purchased these weapons legally. Now, these firearms are illegal. We have a program to compensate them, and they will be returning these firearms with the help of police services, and they will organize ways to collect and destroy weapons. But these people will be compensated and will be able to purchase a legal hunting rifle. I trust that people don't want to violate the criminal code.
Merci pour la réponse.
Thank you for the answer. Is there a plan for those who don't give back their firearms? I see that there was no answer to that. And you allowed Canada Post to move weapons and hold them. I don't know if you've thought about that, because things are not going very well with Canada Post right now. They do currently have permission. We haven't had to use Canada Post services since November in order to do the work with Phase 1. And Canada Post, yes, will be able to support us if needed in the coming year.
Hi there. None of us have seen the list of newly banned guns, and it doesn't appear to have circulated yet. Can somebody please give us an indication of which specific makes and models are now banned and why, for example, as I understand from my colleague Mylène, the SKS is not among them right now?
Thank you so much. And so the list will be circulated very shortly and will be on. There's 324 makes and models, and so it would not be effective. So, but thank you for the question. What I can tell you is that the Canadian Firearms Program, that has a number of subject matter experts, worked extensively over the last year to look at about 559 makes and models. Based on those makes and models, we applied the May 2020 original Order in Council definition, and so we've actually gone through that, and that again highlights the large capacity magazines, the paramilitary style, easily converted to a tactical assault rifle, as well as rapid fire semi-automatic. And so we've processed to date 324 firearms. 185 of those were already restricted, and so the recommendation based on the May 2020 OIC was to move them to prohibited. And then we've been able to look at 139 other firearms that we believe, based on that definition, we've made a recommendation based on our subject matter experts in partnership with Public Safety Canada to our minister, Minister LeBlanc. And subsequently, we have 230 firearms that are outstanding. And as mentioned, we will continue, the Canadian Firearms Program will continue that work in partnership with a subject matter expert panel to provide further recommendations to public safety and eventually to the Minister of Public Safety. And so 144 firearm families, and again, approximately 14,521 have been identified across our country. Those are restricted firearms. We anticipate in the range of 6,000 non-restricted firearms within Canada. So for a total of just approximately 20,000 firearms. So more work to be done, more analysis. We have working on a timeline, and we hope to have a recommendation in early 2025 to public safety and eventually to the minister. Thank you.
Thanks. Just as a follow-up, I think directly to you, is what does that leave in terms of non-restricted firearms now, then, for people to access, ones that you don't think will ever be restricted based on the criteria you're applying? Folks will say, well, hunting rifles are going to be banned now and all of these things. And what does the legal firearm landscape in Canada now look like, statistically or otherwise?
Bear with me. So thank you for the question. And as you're aware, there's about 2.3 million individuals that hold a valid firearms license in our country. And that equates to just over 1.1 million registered restricted firearms in our country. 162,359 are currently registered as prohibited, and which will be part of the larger buyback program. But there's a significant number. New firearms continue to come into our Canadian market. And even in the current list that we've made a recommendation to the minister, which has come into effect today, about 500 guns, new guns have come into that market, have been added to the original list. And so, again, the market continues to be there. It's difficult to predict because we don't actually have a visibility on all the non-restricted firearms that are in our country. And so it's very difficult for us to estimate the numbers that are accessible that are there. We're very much focused on, obviously, the historical, the 2020 OIC definition and threshold. And of course, now moving forward, we apply the C21 Evergreen definition. And as Minister Duclos and Minister LeBlanc alluded to, every firearm coming into the country now will be registered and managed through the firearms reference table. So hopefully that provides some insight. We're happy to give you more information offline and after this. Thank you.
Mark Renzi, Toronto Star.
Thank you. Minister LeBlanc, You've previously put in measures to tackle the illegal smuggling of guns across the border, but police and experts say that remains probably the biggest way that perpetrator of gun violence. So why isn't the focus more on that? Why aren't you proposing more new measures on that issue?
So that is also an area of focus. We absolutely share the concern that organized criminal groups smuggle illegal firearms across the Canadian border. The Canadian Border Services Agency seizes thousands of these firearms in the run of a year. Happy to get you those details of the seizures that CBSA does, and the RCMP also in their work around transnational crime and organized crime does a lot of good work here. And perhaps the Deputy Commissioner, Brian Larkin, could add something, but we're doing both. We're focusing on the border as a source of smuggling of illegal guns. We're going to have more to say, as you know, about strengthening certain postures at the border in the coming weeks. But there already is a real focus on illegal guns crossing the border, the RCMP and CBSA. But the good news is we're going to give them additional resources around border security and additional technologies. So I think we can continue to do both of these efforts. It's not an either-or choice. Keeping Canadian communities safe involves the measures we announced today, previous measures, additional measures we're going to announce in the coming weeks, but absolutely a focus on the illegal arrival of guns into Canada. So I'm confident we're going to do both in a very effective way.
And we're now dealing with an incoming U.S. presidential administration that seems to care a lot about our border and has raised concerns with us about our border. Have you, when you met President-elect Donald Trump, raised the issue of guns coming illegally from the U.S. border? Did you raise that with him, or are you planning to raise that with him, as he seems very comfortable raising issues about our border with us?
So when the Prime Minister and I were at Mar-a-Lago 6 days ago, I guess, last week, the Prime Minister absolutely raised our concern around the arrival of illegal firearms across the Canada-U.S. border. We spoke to the President about that as an example of how we share the American concern around border security and border integrity. So we will continue to talk. There'll be follow-up conversations. The RCMP works with the FBI and alcohol, tobacco, and firearms. But as I said, we're going to be working with the RCMP and CBSA to increase their resources and their personnel. And I have every confidence that they'll continue to focus on this challenge as well with our American partners.
Davis Legree, iPolitics.
Thanks, Valerie, and thanks for taking our questions. I just have one quick one. I'm not sure if it's better directed to Minister LeBlanc or Minister Blair, if you're still over there. Just wondering if there's a preliminary estimate on how many guns potentially collected during the buyback program could be sent to Ukraine, how many they should be expecting to receive.
Thanks for the question. First of all, Ukraine we gave them the list of all the weapons that we had prohibited. They've indicated a number of them that were unique, that they believed they could use. We have not been able to determine a precise number because there's an inquiry now taking place with those retailers, and it's their choice. They get to choose whether or not they wish to either participate in the gun buyback program that Mr. LeBlanc has announced today, or wish to instead make them available through the Department of National Defense to Ukraine. They'll be compensated equally, but we'll know better the numbers when the retailers advise us, and that process is underway now, and the software is in place to enable retailers to tell us precisely what weapons they have in their possession. We'll then compare it against the list that the Ukraine has provided us with, and we'll be able to determine from that how many weapons we'll be able to supply to Ukraine. Thanks.
Nuju, Canadian Press.
Hi. I just want to confirm that all the prohibited guns, those banned in 2020, those banned now, and any future assault style of guns are going to be part of the buyback program.
Perhaps, Valerie, I can take that. Of course they will be. Where the buyback program, as Jean-Yves indicated, with respect to retailers is underway. The remaining program will come out in the next few months. But all of these guns that we have prohibited, of course, will be subject to the buyback program. These people bought these firearms lawfully. They're law-abiding gun owners, and to comply with the law now, they'll be able to return these guns and be compensated for their value.
Thank you. And on the expert panel that you're convening, can you talk a little bit more about that, about what the roadmap ahead for them is when it comes to advice on firearms still on the market right now?
Sure, I can perhaps offer a few comments, and maybe Deputy Commissioner Larkin can add. The RCMP, when we talk to them about undertaking this work, we have a lot of confidence in the judgment and the expertise of the RCMP. I think Canadians do. I was glad that Madame Provost recognized the support that they can bring to this exercise. But we thought, and they thought, it would be useful to have access to a group of technical experts to support their work. This group has met a number of times over the last few weeks. It includes academics. It includes technical experts. There's an Indigenous person who will be participating. Some of them have asked that their names be kept discreet, but perhaps Deputy Commissioner Larkin could add something.
Thank you, Mr. Minister. And so very supportive of the expert panel. The Canadian Firearms Program, which is a regulatory licensing and does have an investigative component, has been working diligently in partnership with Public Safety Canada. We looked at approximately 559 originally since over the last year, and now obviously we're currently announced the 324, which leaves about 230 firearms to continue the analysis. These ones we believe that we would benefit from external guidance to help our subject matter experts look at historical weapons, look at different processes through that to give us also that external lens. We do this every single day. We have a responsibility to ensure compliance with the Canadian Firearms Act, however, believe that this would be a really good use of subject matter experts, including also bringing various lenses, including an Indigenous lens, as we look at the potential impact on society. And so we believe that this is a measured, appropriate response to support the excellent team at the Canadian Firearms Program, which the RCMP has oversight of. So, thank you.
I would like to ask a question. I represent Radio-Canada. You talked about SKS, weapons that have been used in shootings, for example, in Ontario. Is it because of pressure that these firearms aren't on the list, pressure from Indigenous communities or from hunters? Why not have them on the list right away? Valérie, if you would allow me, I will attempt to respond, and if Deputy Commissioner Larkin wishes to add, he can. You are correct. It is a firearm that was used in shootings, mass shootings that we have seen. I am committed to a decision being made with the next list. It is complicated, you are correct, because there are hunters, Indigenous and Inuit hunters that have this weapon, and we are aware of that. We want to reflect on this over the coming weeks. Deputy Commissioner Larkin mentioned experts who will be working with the RCMP, and that includes Indigenous representatives, but we do have to decide eventually, and we want to decide responsibly with the next list, and we will make this decision by February before phase 2 of the buyback program. We talked about the risk of an election. Would you not need to move forward more quickly with the buyback program if you truly want to ensure that this legislation leads to to something. Answer. Valérie, we want to act responsibly. We want this program to be well built, that there are no technical issues. We want it to be safe. Someone mentioned Canada Post. Jean-Yves worked hard on the buyback program. He and his department worked with public safety, and perhaps Jean-Yves can give details on timelines, but I do understand the urgency in acting. We will act as quickly as possible, and for those who have those weapons and who have had them for years, will be eager to receive funds so that they can replace that weapon with a legal weapon. Jean-Yves, two things that I would like to add. We do need to be responsible and efficient, and the RCMP has a crucial role to play. Also, this is something that's going to take months, but this is not all that's happening. We will continue to defend our communities over the coming months and years. And as we mentioned earlier, the other parties also need to be committed regardless of who is in government in the coming months and years, to not take steps back. We are making gains, and that would be cancelled out if a new government were to take all of our effort down. Canadians and Quebecers have a right to ask these questions to the other parties. Over the coming weeks and months, we need to work in partnership with provinces and territories. Provinces and territories have jurisdiction on public safety, police services, and this is very important for the success of Phase 2 with individuals. Phase 1 should be attained quickly and easily for the government, but for Phase 2, we are going to need to work in collaboration with provinces and territories. Canadians and Quebecers wonder how we can work together in collaboration to have a program that will be just as efficient in the coming months. Thank you very much. This concludes the press conference.